Yeah.
And then I'll talk about the agreement.
All right. With that, we are reconvening. Council met in closed session briefly to discuss with our advisors, our consultants, the Comcast cable franchise agreement, the draft that we have before us. Council received an update on any changes and details. With that, I am going to hand it over to Dan Cohen and Tom Robinson, our consultants. Gentlemen, I'll let you go ahead and speak. You're on speakerphone, and we can hear you in council chambers.
Okay, thank you. This is Tom Robinson from CBG Communications, and I'll start the discussion off, the presentation. Essentially, just by way of history, a number of months ago we conducted a needs assessment and did a written survey of the residential community in Salisbury and got substantial response. Also did a PEG access needs assessment, spent some time with PAC 14 and those that use the facility, toured some of the production facilities like the council chambers that are outside of PAC 14. Did a past performance review. Also, Dan Cohen, who will talk in just a second, his firm did a franchise fee audit and then did a system technical review. And out of all that information gathered a number of, a significant amount of data, a number of points where, and subject areas where we wanted to make sure that those were discussed with Comcast, addressed in the franchise, and that was embodied in the conclusions and recommendations of the needs assessment, which were then sent to franchise once the council had a chance to look at them, review them, ask questions about them, those kinds of things. And Dan's firm then took the lead on the negotiations once the needs assessment report and all the attachments, spreadsheets, etc., were all sent off to Comcast. As many of you are aware, Comcast, it took a substantial amount of time to review the needs assessment, respond with its opening proposals, which were not acceptable, and then that began the negotiation process. And so I'll turn it over to Dan, and he can talk about how that proceeded and really how that resulted in the proposed franchise agreement and side letter, which are before you today, and how that responded to the needs that were determined. Hey, Dan?
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan Cohen with the Cohen Law Group. And we had the privilege of representing the city of Salisbury in negotiations with Comcast. As Tom has outlined, the documents that are before you are the result of much preparation prior to the negotiations and then many, many hours of negotiations with the Comcast franchise team. Let me, if I may, just touch on the highlights of the franchise agreement and side agreement, and then welcome any questions that you may have, because certainly we won't be able to cover everything in the short period of time that we have now. As you all know, I mean, a franchise agreement provides benefits to the city and its residents in return for Comcast's use of the public rights of way. Comcast, of course, has wires and other equipment in the public rights of way. The city controls those rights of way as a public trust, and you're entitled under federal law to certain benefits in return for those. So why don't we maybe start with what we call the PEG channels, better known there as PAC 14, and the financial support for that channel now, which could become more than one channel. For the first time in Salisbury's history, the city will get financial support from the cable operator for PAC 14's capital needs. Those will result in quarterly payments once the agreement is approved, and the amount will be, of course, the amount will depend on the number of subscribers at any given time, but based on current subscribership, the total amount over a 10-year period is $2,080,000, so about $200,000 per year for the next 10 years. The PAC 14 is not getting anything from the cable operator now through the city's franchise agreements, so that'll be a really nice change. What will the money be used for? Well, Tom Robinson, who just spoke, did a whole PEG needs assessment, but just to summarize very quickly, I mean, it includes things like an upgrade of city council chambers for video production, new studio and equipment, building out a whole new facility. Obviously, a lot of the filming, production, post-production, control room equipment now is quite old, even in some cases obsolete, and this will allow for replacement of those equipment and facilities. In order to reach that $2 million mark, we needed to bring the county in. The reason being that of the 21,000 or so Comcast subscribers in the county, about 37% of them reside in the city and about 63% in the county. So I'm happy to report that the city was successful in bringing the county into this process, and we're a little bit behind the city when it comes to the county, but we are assisting the county as well in their franchise agreement with Comcast. The final agreement will be very similar to the city's agreement. The county has a few particular issues that are different from those issues of the city, so we're working on those right now. But the bottom line is, in terms of financial support for PAC 14, it'll really be both jurisdictions that will be involved in that. In addition to financial support, there are a lot of other PEG channel enhancements. Just to kind of name a few of them, the right to a second channel, so long as PAC 14 reaches certain programming thresholds. Those thresholds are lower than in the current agreement. Obviously, we would have preferred no thresholds at all, but feel comfortable that those are thresholds that could be easily met by PAC 14. The PAC 14 signal has to go to all Comcast customers, regardless of what video package they have. So customers that have the most basic package would still get PAC 14. The technical quality of the channel must be equivalent to that of commercial channels. There will be some new or kind of rearranged return lines, meaning kind of video origination points. The biggest one being the West Salisbury Fire Station / EOC. That will become a video origination point for PAC 14 to be able to do programming from there. The other kind of maybe smaller, but I think still important things like a process for inserting programming descriptions on Comcast electronic channel guide. That is in this agreement. A big issue was high definition format. That's one that caused a great deal of negotiations with Comcast. An HD channel requires more bandwidth, of course, than even a digital channel. And we have the side agreement addresses that, and in a nutshell, it allows the PAC 14 to get HD format within 3 years, so long as certain programming thresholds are met. And those programming thresholds were weakened considerably, so that I'm confident that PAC 14 will meet those as well. So it's basically a 3-year time period. There are lots of other issues or benefits, shall I say, in this agreement other than the PAC 14 issues. Let me just maybe give a brief overview of those and then, of course, open it up to any questions. Franchise fees, that's kind of the other revenue component in the agreement, the other kind of monetary component. As you all know, you're allowed to assess up to 5% of the cable operator's gross revenues for cable services derived from the city. The current ordinance that the city has doesn't enumerate the revenue sources that are that comprise gross revenues, and there are about 25 different revenue sources. So the new agreement does do that. It has 25 different revenue sources, a few of which are not subject to the franchise fee now, so the city will see, you know, a bit of a bump in franchise fee revenue, plus what we call a crystal ball item. In other words, it would capture any new cable services that Comcast would launch within the franchise term. There's also more franchise fee accountability in this franchise, and by that I include things like a requirement for line item reporting by the cable operator, so that you don't just get a check on a quarterly basis, you actually get a verification report that shows what revenue sources Comcast is paying on. Stronger audit rights. An audit, as Tom said, an audit was done as part of the ascertainment process for this renewal. The audit rights in this agreement are a little stronger. What we call bundled services protection, meaning that, of course, Comcast doesn't just provide cable service, right? It provides internet service and phone service. We want to make sure that for residents that get the package of all three services, sometimes referred to as the triple play, that the discount associated with that package isn't just applied to franchise fees. So it's proportional across the board. I should say, is not just applied to cable services, which is the only service that gives rise to franchise fees. It has to be proportional across all three services. So that's what we call bundled services protection. Customer service standards. I found that, you know, next to cable rates, this might be the most important issue for Comcast customers. There are very strong customer service standards in this agreement. Everything from how long you have to wait on the phone to get a customer service representative to when late fees can be applied to how long you have to wait at your house for a technician to show up, customer complaint standards, etc. So they're a little broader and more measurable, so that the city can truly enforce compliance with those. Just a few more technical requirements. There are stronger technical requirements in this agreement, and really as a result of CBG's technical investigation and report. CBG found that there were some problems out there with the system, and they needed to be corrected. So things like the pedestals that weren't properly secured. There were some power supply boxes and server boxes that were unlocked. Because of those findings, we're actually put in the agreement that those corrections need to be made. And then in the future, Comcast has to provide technical reporting to the city upon request. So that would include things like service outage logs, what are referred to as preventative maintenance logs, trouble call reports. Those are customer complaints that give rise to a technician needing to go to a home. So the city now can get all that information if it wishes. Doesn't come automatically, but if there are some problems out there that the city finds out about, then that section of the agreement can be triggered where Comcast has to give a lot of information about what's going on. Legal protections, of course, like insurance, indemnification, those are strong here. Free services, Comcast will continue to give free cable service to all city facilities, schools, and public libraries. That's also included in the side agreements, and in a nutshell, they will retain the status quo. So whatever exists there now will continue, plus up to what are called DTAs, digital transport adapters. They'll give up to 3 DTAs per building for new facilities or for any facilities that don't have up to 3 DTAs now. But like the GOB, if there are many more connections today than 3, which of course there are, Comcast isn't going to take any of those away. They will maintain the status quo. Just one other item, and then I will close this out and see if there are any questions out there. Enforcement, as you all know, an agreement is not worth the paper it's written on if it can't be enforced. The only way to enforce the city's current franchise really is to terminate it, and that's not an effective or practical enforcement mechanism. So in this new agreement, hopefully they won't have to be imposed, but you have the ability to impose monetary fines if there is a problem that just is not being corrected. The fines aren't large individually, but they can be done on a per-day basis. So it certainly would get Comcast's attention if there were violations of this agreement that weren't corrected within a 30-day time period. So with that, it kind of rounds out the highlights of the franchise, and would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I have one. The fee that will be applied to customers' bills on a monthly basis. This is Jake Day, by the way. Yep. That will be applied to customers' bills on a monthly basis at 80 cents. I'm curious, the fee that is not yet negotiated that the county customers will receive, will that be applied to all county customers, including city residents, or only non-city, county customers, so outside of the city?
Sure. Assuming that everything continues as it has with the county negotiations, that 80 cents per Comcast subscriber will be across the board. It'll be city and county, and that's the amount that goes to support the PAC 14, their capital cost.
I just want to make sure I understand. So in the negotiated franchise agreement that is signed with the county, let's say it's also 80 cents per customer. That will not be applied in addition to the 80 cents per customer applied based on the city franchise agreement to customers inside of the city.
Oh, great question. No one's going to get double dipped. No, it'll be 80 cents. Whether if you live in the city, it's just 80 cents. If you're outside the city, it'll be the same. So okay. No.
Thank you.
The city will not. No city customers will get hit twice.
Thank you. Other questions, Laura?
Well, not so much a question, but I still have an issue that is really sticking with me regarding the possibility of moving the PEG channel with that small amount of funding for rebranding. It's insufficient. It's completely insufficient. I don't like the fact that they have the ability to do that, and certainly not without a meaningful contribution to the rebranding efforts.
Sure. I'm looking at the agreement right now. So there is a
8.3
section there for what happens if Comcast moves the PEG channel, PAC 14, on the channel lineup, and they do have the legal right to do that. And as you said, there is in here a requirement that Comcast has to give advance notice to the city. They also have to include 2 bill inserts, advising residents of the change. And then there's, as you said, there's a small amount, and I agree, it's not as high as we would have liked, but of $3,000 per channel for out-of-pocket expenses associated with rebranding that channel. So, yeah, I mean, we, like other parts of this agreement, we negotiated. We asked for a higher amount. Comcast refused to go beyond that $3,000.
Well, we heard from our PEG channel manager the last time they did that, it cost over $20,000 for the, 22, I believe it was, for the rebranding effort. So $3,000 is woefully inadequate.
I think, let me jump in just a second.
Sure.
I think the, one of the things that's happened recently with all digital technology being used to transport the channels is they literally can be mapped to anywhere in the system, no matter what frequency they are. So the likelihood of it having to move from PAC 14, and obviously it'll have another channel number as HD, and so that'll be a new channel number that will be assigned to it up in the high definition tier, so you'll have both the SD and the HD channel. But again, the likelihood of them needing to move has been reduced significantly because no matter where they put it in their system spectrum, they can map it to 15 on all of the boxes. Where it becomes a little bit of an issue is for those that don't utilize any of the set-top boxes, which are relatively few, those that have the televisions that have QAM tuners in them. But even those, generally, Comcast has been moving to encrypt all channels, so even those, there aren't many of those out on the system where that would be an issue if the channel were to move. And I think the other thing that's involved in there is that with getting PAC 14 on the guide, if they were to move from 14 on the guide, there could be a lot of promotional work that could be done in association with the menu listings on the guide to ensure that people knew that there was going to be a move that was going to occur. Right now, without any of the detail in the guide, just saying public access, that's not informative enough to make a difference. So I agree. It's certainly not the sum that you'd like to see. It will be helpful, but I think these other things will, A, lessen the chance of that happening, and B, lessen the impact of it if it does happen.
Okay. That remapping that you spoke of, thank you for that explanation. The remapping, that's not automatic, and I don't see it referenced in here as a requirement either.
Well, in other words, that's a technical consideration, and unfortunately, I mean, the Federal Communications Commission doesn't let us specify what frequency they actually transport it on. But I think certainly the engineers' channels get remapped all the time, and you never know it because they keep the same channel position on the set-top boxes, but they appear on different frequencies. Where you notice it is if you're not watching with a set-top box, if you're watching with a QAM-tuned television and you have the encryption in it, you'll notice it'll move from, let's say, its current assignment is 16.1, that it'll move to 32.2 on that. But again, that's a very small portion of subscribers, I think less than 1%, that would have that issue. And certainly the company is part of this. You could work with them to make sure that there was some promotional effort. And again, you'll have now access to the digital guide, which will give you additional ability to provide information.
Right. I just want to make sure that our viewers can find us, find PAC 14 and the meetings that they're accustomed to watching. So, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's obviously critical. I tell you, one thing you will see is a bump in viewers. Every single access channel that's put detailed listings on the guide gets a bump in viewers, because that's how people find channels these days. They don't channel surf the way they used to. They guide surf.
Yes.
I think that's the new term for it. So they start somewhere in the guide, and then they move up and down from there. So once they've got detailed listings in the guide, that'll be critical, and you'll find more people will find them and stop on them. And then once they stop on them and start to view, the type of local programming that's there, they'll come back.
Right. You could search too. So, thank you.
Are there other comments or questions?
Regarding the city facilities that are wired for television, do we need any changes in those? Are those good where they are as far as we're concerned? I'm not even sure where they are.
It just
to tell
says
the truth.
3. We pick.
Pardon?
We designate them. It just says 3 facilities.
Okay.
So, GOB, fire station, and I think PAC 14 points of origination.
Studio.
PAC 14 counts as one of our
Our
facilities and points of origination.
The way I read it, it's a good question for them.
Gentlemen, is that how you read it? Is PAC 14 one of the city's points of origination and one of our 3 facilities?
Yes, it's currently connected, and the reason why it was listed as being a new connection in the agreement is it's connected, but it's connected through the government center, and then along with the government center connection to Comcast. And in working with PAC 14, what we wanted to achieve is to have the programming actually come the other way. In other words, PAC 14 would be the centralized focus of programming from every origination point, and then PAC 14 would have a direct fiber feed to Comcast that would essentially run along the shortest route to Comcast. It wouldn't have to go through the government office building. So the connection that's currently there will remain in place. The new connection will allow this sort of centralization feature, and so the government office building would come back to PAC 14. The West Salisbury Fire Station would come back to PAC 14, and then PAC 14 would centralize or aggregate the programming and send it up to Comcast. Because right now the way it works is the programming coming from the government office building does this video audio activated switch, which essentially cuts off the other programming coming from PAC 14, and then once it's off, then the PAC 14 programming that's on their server continues to go forward. So it's a more modern way of having the server really control all the programming that's going on the channel from a central location. And these were just ones that were specified and were costed out as part of the PEG fee. You can add additional ones. There is that capability in the language to specify additional ones. They must design them, provide you with a cost, and then you determine whether you want to continue to, to have that implemented. So it doesn't limit you to only those specified. It's just that those were already determined, that cost was already evaluated versus the 80-cent fee.
Okay.
Was your question whether it's ours or the county's? One of the county's 3 or one of our 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a subsequent question. And I gather from what I'm hearing that's not determined, but
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
The question is ultimately, will the PAC 14 facility be considered or counted against as one of the city's facilities or one of the county's 3 facilities, or both? Which I would think that wouldn't be. I would hope that wouldn't be the case, as that would reduce the overall number of total connected facilities.
Right, and it says 3 facilities. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, and again, it's already connected.
Yeah.
So the new connection is really just to reorient it. And since the PEG fee, again, ultimately pays for these connections, the transport connections and the transport equipment that's used for it, it's really up to you how you want to. They have to do the design. You don't necessarily, even the ones specified in the franchise, you don't necessarily have to do if you determine later that, well, we really don't need to program from that location. The funding would still come in for that. It would just be used for other things. And so it's similar to, the county's looking for some additional facilities, and it's kind of similar there. If the design showed that, against the PEG fee, that there wasn't the cost benefit, then you wouldn't necessarily have to go forward with it. One of the reasons we put that sort of process in there is so you'd have a chance to evaluate the design and say, well, no, you really don't need to go down this road. Let's go down this road. It's a shorter path to the head end. It will reduce our costs.
Okay.
So it's the way the language is written is very flexible.
Like the fire station is not currently wired, and that cost will come out of the PEG channel fee. So.
Okay. All right. Are there other questions, comments?
No.
Concerns? How I think this moves forward, and gentlemen, you correct me if I'm wrong, but how I think this moves forward is any final changes, if they exist, and I don't think there would be any, would be made between now and legislative session, and this would come directly to legislative session.
The only concern I have with that is that until the county has settled on theirs, because that greatly impacts our ability to do the things that we set out to do in this, because of that contribution of the county residents to the PEG channel fee. That portion could be greatly impacted if they don't do their part.
Do you all have a sense of the timeline for the county agreement being finalized?
Yeah, why don't I speak to that? With Comcast, of course, it's difficult to give a time frame because the response time can sometimes be quite slow, especially when things go up to division. But having said that, the last conversation that I had with Comcast was middle of last week. I would say that within the next month or 6 weeks, I think we should have, either, if not a final agreement, be very close to a final agreement. The county issues are not earth-shaking issues. They're issues that I think should be relatively easily resolved. The only reason I hesitate at all is because obviously it takes two to tango, and with Comcast, sometimes issues that seem on the surface to be easy turn out not to be so easy. But I think that within the next 6 weeks, we should have a final deal with Comcast for the county.
Okay. And in terms of the timeline for completing the city's agreement, do you have a sense of, can you respond to Ms. Mitchell's concern that we not put the cart before the horse and finalize our agreement without that agreement in place or without a sort of lockstep action?
Yeah. Why don't I take a stab at that, Tom, and then feel free to jump in. Sure. I completely understand the reasons behind the concern. Obviously, kind of both these agreements, will need to be in place for PAC 14 to get the financial support that it needs. Having said that, I would recommend that if you're all comfortable with the agreement that's been negotiated with the city, that you move to approve it. And I say that really for two reasons. One is there are significant benefits to the city that are in this agreement that the city doesn't have now. Obviously I kind of walked through those, but one that immediately comes to mind is they're going to get more franchise fees. Secondly, I do think that it will help spur the county to approve theirs as well. And I don't mean to imply any foot dragging at all on the part of the county. The county so far has been, very much on board. I had a conference call about 2 weeks ago with the county executive, the county administrator, and an attorney in the law department. They seem to be completely on board with the amount of PAC financial support and the other things that we discussed today. I do think, though, that what I don't want to get into is a situation where the city waits for the county and the county waits for the city and then nobody moves. So I don't think that there is any risk on the part of the city for moving forward at this point. I think there'll be benefits that even go well beyond the PAC channel benefits.
Okay. Laura, you have anything else? All right, well, then what we'll do is I'm going to seek consensus to move this to legislative session. We'll put it on for 3 weeks from now, and if anything changes in the meantime, we can shift it left or right.
Thanks. Yeah, there might well be some very minor things. Comcast has said they may have a couple of other minor things, but if so, I'll, of course, keep Tom Stevenson apprised of that and let him know if there's anything substantive. I don't think there will be.
We will. Well, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Steven.
All right. Is there consensus to move it to legislative session? then?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call Mr. Keith back real quick before we move on to the final. Jack, hey, so we're going on to our final item now. Okay, here we go. Jack, can you hear us?
That's fine.
Okay.
Hello again.
Mr. Moulds, how are you?
Good. All right, this should be an easy one. Hunt Real Estate's in the process of working with the Salisbury Public Works to obtain approval for construction of a 8,320 square foot family dollar store. That's the intersection of Johnson Road and Snow Hill Road. They've contracted with Parker and Associates, and Brock's here if you have any questions, to do the engineering design for the project. And they've been in contact with us regarding the property line expansion that we're going to talk about. Because of the proposed size and setting of the family dollar in conjunction with zoning setbacks, parking regulations, fire lane requirements, and site design requirements for stormwater, it was necessary for the site area to be expanded from its original size to accommodate all these features. This property line expansion entails that the cul-de-sac that's currently there for the city on Johnson Road, which is called the future Stanley Court, be relocated a little bit further to the east, as illustrated in the attached exhibits that are in your packet. This is in tune with what in the future would have been the relocation of Johnson Road to line up with Robbins Road. Mm-hmm. And then that section of Johnson Road will become a cul-de-sac there. So I know, Councilman Mitchell, you had a question about where it was.
Well, you just answered that.
Okay.
Between you and Mrs. Glantz, Google couldn't find it. Nobody, no one knew where this was. Well,
so the cul-de-sac has never been developed. You just have Johnson Road going through there. It was a future thing. So in order to accommodate the family dollar development, they've requested that cul-de-sac be pushed forward a little bit down Johnson Road from Snow Hill Road. Mm-hmm. And our city surveyors going through the documents in terms of the descriptions and everything, so that easement can be made.
Okay.
is it in this area here is where it's
Yep. Yes, it is.
corner?
Yeah, and I have a little sketch, this is the development plans, if you're interested in looking at that.
And it's being pushed further back, like the crosshatched area is the area that it was proposed previously, right? And it's
Right,
being extended.
correct. Move, yes, yep, yep.
Questions? No. Concerns? Comments? Anything you'd like to add?
Mr. Knowles, you don't see anything in traffic flow that's going to change there, do you?
No, I think the gist of eventually when Johnson Road does get redone, that'll help the traffic issue because it'll take traffic and tie it right in with the intersection with Robbins Road with a light. So that's the eventual future to handle the traffic issue. There's really not a lot on there with that cul-de-sac because it's servicing Family Dollar and one or two other properties on the other side there.
So there's this little water area.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to that, is it moving from next to it to in front of it?
This gives you an idea. Family Dollar. This is the new cul-de-sac. The pond that you see on there is actually over here.
Okay.
These ponds feed into that, yes.
So we would have been like here, now we'll be here.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. I'm directionally challenged, so I need pictures.
That's fine. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add, gentlemen? Okay. Questions, comments? All right, is there a council consensus to approve this, move it forward to legislative session?
Indeed, there is.
Consent agenda?
Consent agenda as far as I'm concerned, yeah. Jack, consent agenda, you okay with that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And just real quick, Ms. Glanz, do you have any reason, or council as well, do you have any reason why it couldn't simply be on the next agenda?
No.
I know time's of the essence.
Sure.
Okay. So it'll be on July 13th, consent agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Good evening.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? All right. With that, we're adjourned.
Jake,
Yes.
could you pick up the phone for a second?
Yes. Hey. Yeah. Of course.